You've driven them your entire life. Mile after mile, exit after exit, the US Interstate Highway System feels ordinary, almost invisible. It's the background of American life. Road trips, commutes, long, boring stretches where nothing ever seems to happen. But that familiarity is exactly what makes it so effective as camouflage. Because hidden in plain sight is a design that was never meant to be questioned. A system whose true purpose only makes sense if you stop seeing it as transportation and start seeing it as infrastructure for survival. The Interstate Highway System was sold to the public as convenience and commerce, but it was born in fear. Fear of nuclear war, fear of invasion, fear that the next attack wouldn't come from across an ocean, but from the sky. When President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act in 1956, America was deep in the Cold War. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, long-range bombers could reach US cities, intercontinental ballistic missiles were no longer theoretical. Civil defense wasn't just about duck and cover drills, it was about mobility. How do you move an entire government if Washington is gone? How do you move troops, supplies, aircraft, and leadership if air bases are destroyed in the first strike? The answer wasn't underground alone, it was horizontal. Roads, lots of them, wide ones, strong ones, straight ones. Buried in defense planning documents that were later declassified is a requirement that still sounds unbelievable today. A significant portion of the interstate system had to be built straight and flat enough to serve as emergency runways. The most commonly cited figure is 1 out of every 5 miles. Whether the exact ratio was enforced everywhere is debated, but the intent is not. These highways were engineered with load-bearing capacity, sightlines, grades, and widths that far exceeded civilian needs. Long ruler-straight stretches across deserts, plains, and farmland weren't accidents of geography. They were deliberate. Because if every runway was destroyed, the highway became the runway. This wasn't theoretical. Other countries actively practiced it. NATO allies trained fighter jets to land on highways. Sweden still maintains road bases designed for aircraft operations. The United States didn't publicize drills, but the engineering tells the story. Overpasses built higher than necessary, medians wide enough to clear wingspans, shoulders reinforced like tarmacs, drainage systems designed to handle jet wash. When you see an empty, arrow-straight stretch of interstate cutting through absolute nowhere, you're not just looking at a road, you're looking at a contingency plan. And then there's the numbering system, something most drivers never think about beyond navigation. 1- and 2-digit interstates connect regions, east-west, north-south, simple. But 3-digit interstates are where things get interesting. Officially, they're loops and spurs, beltways around cities, connectors for traffic flow, but when you map them against military installations, federal facilities, and restricted zones, patterns start to emerge. I-495 doesn't just circle Washington, it links directly to access points used by defense agencies, and I-270 doesn't just serve commuters, it leads straight toward hardened federal corridors. Across the country, 3-digit interstates frequently terminate not at cities but at bases, depots, airfields, and places that don't appear on tourist maps. The government says that's coincidence. Critics say it's design. Because in an emergency, you don't want evacuation routes tangled in civilian traffic. You want controlled access, limited entry points, roads that can be shut down, reversed, or cleared within minutes. And 3-digit interstates, shorter, less visible, often lightly trafficked, are perfect for that role. That brings us to the exits, or more specifically the exits that shouldn't exist. Across the United States, there are exits in remote areas that lead to almost nothing. No gas stations, no towns, no signage explaining why the exit exists at all. Sometimes it ends at a locked gate, sometimes at a fenced compound, sometimes at a wide, overbuilt road that just, abruptly stops. On Google Earth, these locations just look wrong. Too much pavement, too much infrastructure, not enough explanation. Take exits in parts of South Dakota, Nevada, Arizona, or Utah. Vast stretches of land, barely populated, yet the exit ramps are pristine, maintained, monitored. In some cases, they lead toward known military zones. In others, the destination is officially undisclosed. Locals often have stories about security patrols, restricted access, or sudden enforcement if you linger too long. These aren't abandoned places, they're quiet places, and, yeah, silence is often intentional. To understand why, you have to understand continuity of government. COG. For decades, the United States government planned for the possibility that Washington, D.C. would not survive a first strike. Entire agencies had relocation plans, officials had assigned destinations. Backup command centers were constructed deep underground and far from cities. This network of facilities formed what researchers later called the Federal Relocation Arc, a loose chain of hardened sites stretching away from the East Coast into the interior of the country. These weren't bunkers you could just fly to. In a nuclear scenario, airspace would be, well, chaotic or even unusable. Airports would be primary targets, helicopters are pretty limited, trains require centralized hubs, but roads, on the other hand, are decentralized. They're redundant, and honestly, they're hard to eliminate entirely. The interstate system wasn't just how civilians would flee, it was, in fact, how the government would move. Quietly, quickly, and under control. This explains another strange feature of the interstates, why so many major routes avoid dense urban cores. Instead of cutting straight through cities, they often skirt around them. Officially, this reduced congestion. Unofficially, it meant evacuation routes wouldn't be trapped inside blast zones. It meant convoys could bypass population centers entirely. It meant continuity didn't depend on public order. And what about those massive interchanges in the middle of nowhere, the ones that feel absurdly oversized for the traffic they serve? 4-level stacks connecting to roads you've never heard of, ramps built to handle far more volume than they ever see. From a civilian planning perspective, they're inefficient, but from a defense logistics perspective, they're perfect staging nodes. There's also the question of secrecy. I mean, if this system was so critical, why was it ever revealed at all? The answer is that it wasn't, at least not intentionally. The public version of the interstate system, well, it focuses on commerce, safety, and convenience. Defense requirements were buried inside engineering standards and classified annexes. Over time, as Cold War urgency faded, many people assumed the rumors were exaggerations. But infrastructure doesn't forget. Roads built for jets don't suddenly stop being straight. Exits built for access don't disappear, they just blend in. Even today, continuity planning hasn't gone away, it's evolved. Threats have changed, but redundancy remains, mobility remains. And the interstate system still exists exactly where it always has, ready, whether we think about it or not. So the next time you're driving through a stretch of highway that feels unsettlingly empty, with perfect sight lines and no curves for miles, ask yourself why. Ask why the overpasses are so tall, ask why the shoulders are so wide, ask why there's an exit to nowhere that looks better maintained than the road to your own neighborhood. Because maybe you're not just on a highway, maybe you're on a backup plan, a runway disguised as asphalt, a corridor designed not for everyday life, but for the day everything changes. And if you want to know what's really at the end of those exits, who built them, who maintains them, and who they're actually for, then you already know what to do. The map is bigger than it looks, and we've only traced the surface.